Welcome, everyone, to the February 2023 meeting of the Humanist Society of Santa Barbara. My name is Judy Flattery. I'm the president of the society. HSSB is a nonprofit, 501c3, 100% volunteer-run organization, founded in the mid-90s, and we've got about 120, 125 members. We welcome new members interested in finding out more about humanism and out with us. We do monthly educational meetings on Zoom, and then we edit the talks and post them on our YouTube channel. We also do in-person social events. Today, we're doing both. We're doing this educational Zoom meeting followed by an in-person social event. Join us for pizza after the talk and maybe a stroll over to the local CVS. We have a monthly newsletter, the Secular Circular, which is available for free via email. And we do post our public events on our Meetup site. Our speaker today is Nick Little. He's talking about fighting secular and skeptical legal battles on new fronts, CFI's legal challenge to homeopathy from the Center for Inquiry. So I always like to take a look at, when we have our speakers, how does the topic relate to humanism? And so this month I took a look at the Affirmations of Humanism, a Statement of Principles by Paul Kurtz, who incidentally founded the Center for Inquiry, right? And there's 4 of them that spoke to me. One is, we are committed to the application of reason and science to the understanding of the universe and the solving of human problems. We deplore efforts to denigrate human intelligence, to seek to explain the world in supernatural terms, and to look outside nature for salvation. We believe that scientific discovery and technology can contribute to the betterment of human life, and we are skeptical of untested claims to knowledge, and we're open to novel ideas and seek new departures in our thinking. So all of that seemed to relate to this topic. Let me tell you a little bit about our program. The legal climate has become more hostile to the rights of nonbelievers, with additional privilege being granted to the religious. Nick Little, attorney for the Center for Inquiry, will discuss how this changing environment impacts the cases that can be brought forward and how the Center for Inquiry has expanded its scope to challenge pseudoscience through the courts. Nick Little has filed CFI's groundbreaking consumer protection lawsuit against CVS stores for their deceptive marketing of homeopathic products. CFI is also suing Boiron, the world's largest homeopathic manufacturer, as well as the Food and Drug Administration, to access information regarding homeopathy, which the agency is refusing to release under the Freedom of Information Act. Their ongoing lawsuits against retailers and manufacturers of homeopathic products raises a whole host of questions, including why the government isn't doing more to protect us from this kind of nonsense. Nick Little is Vice President, General Counsel, and Legal Director of the Center for Inquiry. As CFI's attorney, he supervises the center's litigation in the area of separation of church and state and the protection of the rights of non-believers. He has brought multiple suits to require states to permit secular wedding celebrants. Educated at Oxford University, University of Warwick, and Vanderbilt University Law School, he seeks to keep CFI involved in cutting-edge litigation to further its mission of a secular society based on reason, science, and humanist values. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Nick.
It's wonderful to be here today and talk to people on this. We've had a lot of developments recently in this area, and it's something I feel incredibly passionate on, and you're going to, by the end of this, start thinking maybe I'm more obsessed with this than your typical alt-med type person. So starting off, I was asked to present on this, and what I try and do is also talk about what led us to this as an organization, because this is not the typical lawsuit that you see from church-state organizations. I work very closely with American Atheists, with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, AHA, and they're focusing far more on the cases we've all seen, the war memorial crosses, the Ten Commandment displays, all of this. Why am I doing this? Well, want to talk to you a little bit about what we're facing out there, the legal landscape. And I don't think in any way it's an exaggeration to describe the current legal landscape we're facing as the worst in decades. It's no secret where we are. We talk about having a 6-3 majority against us in the Supreme Court. I actually think that's incredibly optimistic. Justice Kagan has shown herself to be no friend of the secular movement and secularism. And we just simply don't know, Justice Jackson, yet which way she will fall on these issues. Justice Sotomayor is a true friend of a secular society, but that puts us at 7-2 or 8-1 in there. And it's not just the Supreme Court. This is going down in through the lower court system. We're seeing at the moment there's a district court in Texas that may take the right to chemical abortion away from the entire country, and quite probably will. What have we seen of this? It's the result of so many things. We're seeing district court judgeships being handed out as political favors rather than to qualified people. This whole notion of a district court being able to put a nationwide injunction on is scary. And also, when those injunctions were coming down for things we liked, we should have been opposing them then, but we didn't, and here we are. So, focusing on the Supreme Court, we're looking at a situation where the rules have fundamentally changed. And in fact, it's gone further than that. We are now in a legal world that doesn't have rules. And that's terrifying if you're a lawyer, because we like rules, we like order, we like predictability. This here is a shot of the Bladensburg Peace Cross. This is public land. This is a war memorial on a roundabout in one of the busiest parts of Maryland and the DC suburb areas. It is a 40-foot concrete cross. Supreme Court a couple of years ago managed to rule that this was not a religious symbol. It is impossible to rationalize that as a lawyer. It is clearly a religious symbol. And they're not even trying anymore. They don't even feel that they have to work around things anymore. This is a photo, and I apologize it's black and white, but this is a photo which I got from a very rare source. In fact, I've never seen a photo from this source before. This photo was in Justice Sotomayor's dissent in the Coach Kennedy versus Bremerton School District case. According to the majority of the Supreme Court in this ruling, what is going on in that photo is a private moment of prayer, private personal moment of prayer. It's not. I mean, it just clearly isn't. And the court completely ignored the facts of the case when they're talking about this. And I've had people talking to me saying, isn't it a good thing that they felt they had to ignore what was going on, to ignore the facts? And it's really not. I mean, the first thing is that they felt able to completely ignore what the facts are. But the second thing is, when this case gets cited in the future, when this is used as precedent, it's going to turn around and it's going to be that the Supreme Court allowed this public prayer involving students. It's not going to be thought of as a private prayer anymore. This is what we're facing. And it's important to realize that, historically speaking, this is the normal. The Warren Court, the progressive era of the Supreme Court as increasing people's rights, was the historical aberration. Did some great things, but we are seeing now the use of the courts in the conservative fashion that they've typically been used, rolling back rights. We look back to the civil rights movement, and the two great successes legally of the civil rights movement were the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. We've already seen the Voting Rights Act largely eviscerated by this current court. We're seeing cases going up now, such as the 303 Creative case, which is the case about the wedding website designer who doesn't want to do same-sex weddings, that are going to start to eviscerate the Civil Rights Act and the right to be served in a public business. It's frightening. It is worrying. We're facing all these culture war battles. We're fighting on abortion. We've seen the shift from the legal environment from Roe versus Wade to the Dobbs decision, allowing states to outlaw abortion. LGBTQ rights cases, the 303 Creative I mentioned, the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, all of these religious rights cases. There's even questions as to whether same-sex marriage, the Obergefell decision, will be overturned. Religious exemptions cases, it's not just about wedding cakes. It's also about people in hospitals. There are states now passing laws allowing hospital staff down to the level of janitors to refuse to participate in care being given to transgender people. The huge problem here is this cannot be limited. If you can have a religious exemption to same-sex couples, you can also make exactly the same argument about interracial couples. There's no fundamental way of distinguishing with them. Biggest area of the battle we're facing is in schools. You look at it, every state is pushing for school vouchers everywhere. We had the big Supreme Court case of Carson versus Macon on this. The ministerial exemption, where religious schools are claiming the right to fire teachers as if they were religious ministers, and so not subject to any discrimination laws. The Supreme Court ruled, and I'm trying to remember the case name, I'm blanking on it. I'm sorry, a Catholic school teacher was fired after she disclosed she had breast cancer, and they're allowed to do that. Prayer in schools, those great decisions we have banning compulsory prayer in schools, we're seeing that starting to get rolled back. Science and the teaching of evolution, we do a lot of work at CFI on this. It's terrifying how we might be losing some of these battles. Even to the level of book banning, we've all been seeing what's going on in Florida at the moment. It is not just Florida. This is many, many states on it. So we're facing all of this, and we are fighting what essentially are incredibly defensive battles at every stage. And a lot of those battles we're losing. That's worrying. So what do we do? Where do we go? Despite what groups like the Satanic Temple and the Pastafarians tell you, there just isn't a magic bullet. There's no going out there and suing them saying, you have to give the same rights to our invented religion, which all religions are inventive. That assumes that we have a fair and impartial Supreme Court that's going to say, you know what, you're right, you caught us. Now we have to give you the same rights. As we've seen, they're not going to do that. So I started looking at where else I can have an impact on this. And I started looking at the area of pseudoscience. So I thought I'd first ask the question of what is pseudoscience on this? And depending on what group I'm talking to, I go into different depths. But essentially, pseudoscience is nonsense dressed in the garb of science. It tries to present itself as science. It tries to pretend to follow the scientific method. But in fact, it puts the cart before the horse. It makes a conclusion and then goes out and manipulates data to try and justify that. Some of it is just so patently ridiculous. I always use like Reiki healing as an example of this. Someone waving their hands over you, adjusting your energy, your chi. But some of it is pretty intertwined with our regular life. You open the newspaper, if anybody buys a newspaper anymore, and you see horoscopes printed in it. And going back to the first Cosmos, I'll always remember the spot with Carl Sagan talking about just how nonsensical horoscopes are. Jim Underdown heads up our investigations group at CFI, which is kind of the fun part of the job, where we offer $500,000 to anyone who can prove they have paranormal abilities. So that gets the real fun people out. The people, we had one, and Jim is still mad at me that I would not let him test this person who claimed that she could stop a bullet that was shot at her. And I would not allow CFI to shoot a woman just to not give her money. Why doesn't the government stop these people? And how can we stop to present ourselves? Well, there's been the notion around this whole idea of caveat emptor, that the marketplace can deal with it, that the marketplace will protect us, that people won't buy junk. If you believe people won't buy junk, you have never been to Walmart a week before Christmas. And history just doesn't bear this out for us. We have a history of flim-flam. I love that phrase. This is why I'm bringing the suits, because it allows me to use terms like flim-flam. Scams, incompetence, and lack of care. We have the priority of profit over service. And this notion of caveat emptor has been shown historically just not to work. The tobacco companies, a classic example of this. French wine that was loaded with antifreeze. Volkswagen diesel cars. The whole global warming situation with the oil companies. The people who have the information to protect us are the people who have the incentive not to protect us because they can make more money this way. There's a massive information imbalance out there, and anytime there's an information imbalance, you can profit on it. And nowhere, I would argue, is this more prevalent than in good old alternative medicine, alt-med. As Tim Minchin says, you know what they call alternative medicine that's been proved to work? Medicine. So that's where we are. So we turn and we look to the government to protect us. The government passes regulations, it legislates on that. It litigates those people who break these. It enforces the rules and it educates people, in theory. But the thing is, they just have not been doing that, because there's a lot of problems here. The first problem is you've got a huge issue between the states and the federal government. I was under the impression that about 150 years ago, we sorted this all out in favor of federal regulation, but people are pushing back on that. So you've got states doing things differently. Overall, you've got multiple government agencies dealing with this. In my area, with alt-med, you're dealing with the Food and Drug Administration, but also the Federal Trade Commission, which deals with the labeling and marketing of these. And their rules may not actually work with each other. And the amount of rules are staggering. Between 1995 and 2011, the United States Congress passed 4,312 laws and then created 88,899 regulations to deal with those. Those regulations are all put in a book called the CFR, the Congressional Federal Register, which in 2019 had 185,984 pages. No one knows what regulations are out there. No one knows which ones are enforced, apart from people in the industry. In fact, this issue of the amount of laws is so huge that it has been estimated, and I'm not 100% on board with this estimate, but it has been estimated that your average person commits 2 felonies a day without knowing it. I commit none because I'm a good person, but on the other hand, Jim Underdown commits 4 a day, so he makes up my average on it. And you then get to this situation that we refer to as agency capture, that lobbyists come in. There's the bad side of it, the really criminal side of it, which is the buying favors. But there's also the problem that the administrators, the people in the government, simply don't have the knowledge or resources to be doing things. And who do they turn to for the knowledge? The people from the industry itself. And then you've got the huge overall problem, government sloth. The government really just doesn't like doing things if it can get away with it. So let's talk a little about homeopathy. You know, I got that. I'm going to give you a very brief rundown on what homeopathy is and why did I choose to focus on homeopathy. Why do I choose homeopathy? Because it's really bullshit. It's not partially bullshit. It is complete and utter nonsense. I like to describe homeopathy as the Scientology of alt-med. And you know, with Scientology, like every religion, there's some crazy stories about it, but Scientology is just one big ball of crazy. Homeopathy, it came about a confidence trickster, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, in the 1700s. Worked out this way to make money. You see, it is like Scientology. We've got our L. Ron Hubbard of alt-med here. It rests on two utterly nonsensical premises that science just destroys. The first is like treats like. So if a substance causes a symptom, you can use that substance to treat a symptom. There's no basis for this. It makes no sense whatsoever. I imagine emergency rooms would get in trouble if they started treating gunshot wounds by shooting the person more. But that's where we are. So that's number one, stupid. Like treats right. Number two, stupid is possibly even more stupid. It's the theory of infinitesimal doses. What that means is the more you dilute something, the weaker it gets, the more powerful it is. I would love this because my bank balance would make me richer than, but this just isn't the way the world works. So these products are diluted down either 1 part in 10 or 1 part to 100. And then they do that again and again and again. And the most common homeopathic remedy, the most popular one, something called oscillococcinum, which they sell as a flu cure, that is a 200C dilution. 200C means they dilute it 1 in 100, and then they take that and do it 1 in 100, and they do the whole thing 200 times. So there is a 1 times 10 to the power of 400 dilution by the time you get to the end. There is approximately 1 times 10 to the power of 78 atoms in the known universe. It is a physical impossibility that there is anything of the original substance left by the time it gets into your oscillococcinum pill. Which is good news because oscillococcinum, the active ingredient is Annus barberi. Nice Latin name. What is Annus barberi? It is the heart and liver of a Muscovy duck diluted down. How they thought this would cure flu, I don't know, but they do. It is an actual scientific impossibility that there is any duck offal in the final product. They then came out with a third complete crazy notion to explain that because they suddenly realized, you know, we've got to tell people how this works. Water memory. Water remembers what is dissolved in it as you dissolve things further. So this is why I focus on homeopathy and why I call it A, bullshit, and B, the Scientology of alt-med, because it is utterly, utterly crazy. But it is regulated by the government. All homeopathic products are drugs under the 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, which included the HPUS, which is the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States, as an official list of drugs. The HPUS, I refer to it as like the big bumper book of homeopathy, the spell book of homeopathy, whatever. It's ridiculous. This is there. So how do they regulate it? Well, you've got the FDA. Food and Drug Administration is up front here. What does the FDA do? Well, if you have a new drug, it has to be approved by the FDA. You have to show it is safe and you have to show it is efficacious, that it actually works. That's a problem for homeopathy because, as we've discovered, there's nothing in there. No homeopathic product has ever been approved by the FDA as safe and effective. So they are all being sold without FDA approval, despite what they like. For a long time, this just didn't matter because no one knew what homeopathy was. Nobody really used it. It was predominantly individual practitioners that you would go to, and incredibly minor on this. But then you get the 1970s in particular, and the growth of the feeling against big medicine, against the pharma companies, as we were talking beforehand, it's hard for me to say trust Big Pharma because Big Pharma has done some incredibly terrible things, whether it's thalidomide, which hit Britain obviously far worse, whether it's the Sackler brothers and Oxy, all of this, there are problems. And as you know, in the 70s, there was this development of a mistrust of authorities generally, which led to the big growth in alternative medicine on this. And so you turn around in 1988, the FDA put into place CPG, which is basically it's the guidance that they put out on how they're going to enforce their regulations. Compliance policy guide, 400-400. What did this say? Said many things, and this is part of when you can see in CVS later or when you go to a CVS yourself. It's a requirement that it would have English names on it. So rather than saying Annus barbari, it would say duck, heart, and liver, which the industry doesn't like because people buy things with Latin names on. They tend not to buy things with the actual name. So this 1988, how long ago is that? It feels like it's a couple of years ago, but we're actually talking 34, 35 years ago. None of this was ever enforced. So they turned around and realized that, and part of it was because we were on their backs on this, and they revoked this in 2019 and have put in what they call, and I'm sorry, it's hard to see on the slide, a risk-based policy. Risk-based policy is they'll target certain homeopathic drugs. They'll target drugs that are products that are potentially dangerous, like there was a case with Highlands recently. They're baby teething tablets, which are made out of deadly nightshade. Believe me, they use a Latin name. They do not put deadly nightshade on the packaging of an infant bucket. And what happened? This is meant to be diluted down. They screwed up the dilution. And so children died from this. So products that are inherently dangerous because they use poisons. Homeopathic treatments for serious diseases. Things like when I see homeopathic cancer treatments, I get angry as hell. Injectable homeopathic products rather than ones that come in pill format. But what this essentially means, this is good in one way, but what it essentially means is they are not going to do anything about your retail stuff. So I wanted then to look on, that's the FDA. The FTC, which deals with advertising and marketing of these products, again put out a enforcement policy statement, same thing, in 2016, which if you have to, don't ever read these things. These are some of the most tedious things ever put out, things in the Federal Register. But pulled out a bit of view. They took this language almost completely from something we recommended. So we're feeling very proud of this. This came out in 2016 and said, if you are going to market homeopathy, it will be deceptive marketing unless you say, one, there is no scientific evidence that the product works. Two, that the product claims are based on theories from the 1700s, not acceptable by most modern medical experts. 2019, they were required to do that. I don't know if you've looked at the shelves. I've never seen that on anything. They simply haven't enforced this. Let's look at what happens with regulation and practice. And this is one of my, I found this online, homeopathic house call. It's kind of like concierge medicine, but for crazies. And you look at this and it's great. You've got this pretty kind looking nurse and a very caring mother who, her facial, that's something, but she's taking a kid there and homeopathy is now within reach. And you look down, what do they say? What is homeopathy? They call it safe, non-toxic, natural. It stimulates your body to heal itself. Actually, it doesn't. It's a 200-year-old system of healing that has proven to be effective. No. Homeopathic remedies are regulated by the FDA. No, they should be regulated by the FDA, and they're not. And they're manufactured according to stringent standards unless they're using deadly nightshade for babies. Then you see they put right down at the bottom of the page a disclaimer. Homeopathic house call is not intended to replace qualified medical attention, blah, blah, blah. Nothing is intended to make diagnosis, prescriptions, or recommended treatments. That's very different to the original promise they made. People don't even get down to this disclaimer, and yet nothing is happening on it. And I want to remind you again that at all the times they talk about the FDA, no homeopathic product on the market at the moment has been approved by the FDA. Not one single product. So why aren't they regulating this? Why the government? Well, the first thing is they can't do it. They don't have the competence, they don't have the information, they don't have the resources. Over the past, well, not the past 4 years, but the 4 years before the last election, they just went completely hands off on anything on this. Issues are misrepresented on this. They don't want to regulate it. Why? They've been captured, they get good lobbying money. They argue they've got better things to do, and I can see that. When I went to the DC government and said, why aren't they doing anything? The guy said, I have 2 lawyers to handle drugs across the whole of DC. I focus on fake cancer cures being shipped up from Mexico. And I'm like, dude, I totally get where you're at. So that's why I sued instead. So what we've left with is the worst of both worlds. There is a relatively strict federal regulatory system that then simply isn't enforced. So the industry can point to it and say, look, we're regulated, but they're not. So just sue them. It's the American way, after all. Here we are. I'm allowed to make these jokes because I am both a lawyer and almost American now. There are problems with lawsuits. The first is you have to find a person to sue. Why don't you sue the government? I've been asked. Well, the government, because it's populated with lawyers, is really smart about this. They make it impossible to sue them for not doing their job. Probably a good thing, because we should be sorting this out through the electoral system, through democracy. But I'm going to be honest with you, level of enforcement on homeopathic products is not going to swing the next presidential election. It's not going to swing any elections. It's simply not important enough for people. So we decided we're going to go after the retailers and we're going to go after the manufacturers. Why the retailers in particular? Well, if you look at Walmart and you look at CVS, they advertise themselves as being your friend, your assistant in your healthcare decisions, and yet they sell this nonsense. Also, as I said, we're going after Boiron, the manufacturer. There's no possibility of settling with Boiron. We want them to stop manufacturing things. They want to carry on making money. There's no middle ground there. CVS, Walmart, all of these stores don't really care about homeopathy in the same way. If someone comes in wanting to buy a flu remedy, profit margins aside, they genuinely don't care if they buy a silicoccinum that does nothing or they buy NyQuil, which works. Doesn't matter to CVS. So we have the opportunity of influencing them, because if we can make it more of a pain in the butt to carry on the way they are, then we'll go somewhere. So we're looking on that. Then you have to have standing. Standing is a legal term for skin in the game. It's a right to sue. That's very difficult in the alt med world. Generally speaking, people who buy alternative medicine like it, and that's why they buy it. If they don't know they're buying it, that's the big problem. We found a thing in the DC law which allows us to sue as a non-profit on behalf of the people. So that's where we are. Unfortunately, as anybody who has been involved in it, the entire legal system is fundamentally broken. When things take too long, they cost too much money. And this is particularly true in the area of science. Courts do not do science well. A court is about who is the most persuasive, who has the best arguments. Science simply doesn't do that. And you can see that with expert witnesses the whole way. So here's what suits we've brought. Well, we set up an organization called the Office of Consumer Protection from Pseudoscience. Nice logo. Everything's great. And that's who we're bringing the suits through. First, we're suing Boiron, the manufacturer, the world's biggest manufacturer of homeopathy. this French company. What are we claiming? Well, unfortunately, we can't sue them for making homeopathic products because you're allowed to do that. So instead, we're suing them for presenting them in a deceptive fashion. You have products, and we tested these products, one which is to cure flu, one which is to cure insomnia, one which is to cure stress. All of these products are identical when you test them because they're just inert substances. So our argument is that that's deceptive because I could buy one big bottle of one of the pills and take it for everything. As I mentioned, we are now looking, because we want to take on some of the big companies, Amazon, who sell this nonsense, and Chewy, because you know what, if you choose to take homeopathy, I'm going to let you. If you're giving it to your pet, I get really angry on that. So we've sent warning letters to both of them. What do Amazon do? Look at this. This is a silicocinum, the nonsense thing I mentioned. Amazon's choice. They get paid to do that, but they present it as if they're recommending it. Then we've got the Walmart and the CVS lawsuits. What happened? Well, we lost. We got kicked out in the trial court because they said, one, we weren't the right type of nonprofit to sue, and two, we failed to adequately show what the harm was. Well, we went up to the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, and we did this. I argued these on January the 13th last year. They took until the end of September to make their decision, but we won. We won, we have standing, and this is the huge part. This is the really important part. Product placement and signage. Putting something on a shelf that says pain relief is a statement to a customer, or can be a statement to a customer, that it relieves pain. I don't think that's radical, but apparently they argued that they're allowed to do that. Putting something above a sign that says cold and flu suggests that it treats cold and flu. Homeopathic products don't. To wrap up before I take questions on this, how can you people help? The first thing I want you to do is to look on our website at the Office of Consumer Protection from Pseudoscience. There's a form to report stuff there. You can come, you can tell me what you're seeing out there. We want to bring more of these suits. You can serve as plaintiffs. At the moment we're suing in DC. I want to sue CVS in California. I want to go after them in New York. I need people who have bought homeopathic products by mistake. I've done it. I've been rushing through and just grabbed something off the shelf, got home and realized I've spent $19 on sugar pills or water. We're going to start up on actions of this. We're going to work on letters to send, questions to ask your pharmacist. Pharmacists are professionals. They cannot be happy that their department is selling this complete garbage. And finally, I got to say, we're a non-profit. Donations. The Boiron suit is going ahead. We just signed a contract with an expert witness. That's $500 an hour on that. So maybe we should sort of like have her where, if you want your corporations to sponsor her and things. That is where we are with these cases. They're moving forward. What is our goal? What do we want? We're not trying to stop people buying homeopathy. We wish they would, but the law allows them. We want corporations like CVS and Walmart to present these responsibly. We want them to separate it off and to tell people what homeopathy is. But some kind of, doesn't even have to be a warning, a disclaimer. The language I love is that FTC language, from the 1700s, no scientific evidence it works. If we get that, we're going to be happy, but they're fighting back. So thank you for your time, for listening. I hope I provided some education.
If anybody has a question, raise your hand or unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat.
Or any of the Supreme Court stuff as well. I'm more than happy to give you my radical interpretation that will cause tears.
Robert.
Thank you for your good work. I think it's good what you're doing. I think there's other problems with the FDA that in some way are as bad or worse. The big pharma has a complete lock on the FDA so that people who do have actual treatments that are safe and effective have almost no way to enter the system. It costs tens of millions of dollars to get a safe and effective treatment through the system. I realize that's probably not in your league, but I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, Robert, you're 100% right. There are major problems in the FDA with the whole process. I don't know how we solve those. I would love to see those solved. Again, it's one of the reasons I carved out homeopathy on it, because it is so far out there. It is so wrong. And yet people look at it as like, oh, this is this natural way. We're sticking it to big pharma when we buy this. Except Boiron's a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation. People are addressing that in the wrong way. It doesn't cure the problem. I have a lot of friends in the medical field. I've heard comments like yours, Robert, multiple times. Yes, I hope they turn around and start, for example, end-of-life drugs. I mean, huge issues there that we can move towards allowing you more leeway on terminal patients if they want to try treatments, for example. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't. I'm sorry.
Do you have any co-plaintiffs? Have you sought co-plaintiffs, both in terms of having a more powerful presentation in the court and for that great big word on the screen, donations?
We have not yet. We want to test this theory in DC because it allows us to sue as an organization. So certainly when we start looking outside, and I'm already been contacting old friends of mine from law school who work for various plaintiffs' law firms. As an organization, we're not going to be running the Super Bowl ad at halftime saying, call this number and sign up for our lawsuit. But plaintiffs' bar firms are going to be doing that. So if we can work with them, it is much easier for CVS, for Walmart to get sued by a firm representing a class of people, right, because they can buy their way out of it. And I don't blame people. If you have bought a product that you bought off for $25 and Walmart turns around and says, I'll give you $10,000 to shut up about it, take that $10,000 and go on vacation with it. Because we're trying to get them to make actual physical changes, there's an advantage to not having individual plaintiffs. We're going to need individual plaintiffs when we start moving into outside of DC. It's also why I'm trying in any settlement talks, I'm saying to them, let's look at this as a nationwide thing. Let's not just deal with DC. Let's try and see if we can do this across the country.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. What about public pressure? It's my understanding that Walgreens and CVS and some of the other chains at least stop selling cigarettes. So they are open to some humanity.
That's actually the reason I chose CVS. And I said this to them because a lawsuit doesn't just drop out of the air. There's a lot of things you do beforehand. And one of them is you write to the corporation and warn them what you're about to do and say, hey, is there any way we can do this without going through the effort of a lawsuit? So I said to them, you were the people who led on this. You took cigarettes out of your stores because they're not healthy. Here is another product that is not healthy. You can trumpet this from the heights that you are the consumer-friendly store. They didn't buy into it, unfortunately. Yes, consumer pressure on this. And I think if we get CVS to make a change, we're then going to go to Walgreens and say, do you want to be next? Do you want to get sued next? Because you're going to lose. Yeah, there will be a role for public pressure on it. What I want to start happening is to start putting together form letters for people to send to their pharmacists. Like, we found out interesting, some stores, Wegmans, for example, does not allow its pharmacists to recommend homeopathy. If you're not allowed to recommend it, why is it on sale there, though? Shouldn't you stand behind your product? So there's all these kind of things. I would like to see, we're working with the APA, the pharmacist organization, to properly enforce their code of conduct, because their code of conduct says that they should not recommend any harmful products. or worthless products. If we can get them to put a statement out to people, don't recommend homeopathy patients, run up against the problem that this has nothing in it. It's really, really to make. I mean, it's an absolute mother's dream. Sell a sugar pill at a high cost. There are independent pharmacies who will only stay in business because of their sale of alt med junk. And this is back to the problems with the FDA that Robert was talking about earlier. Part of the problem we face is that healthcare is so screwed up in this country. Why do people go to CVS for they can't afford a copay? And so your kid has pink eye, you've just worked the whole day, your kid's screaming, wants to go home, you walk into CVS, you go down the aisle. If you look at all the homeopathic products, they are bright packaging. They talk about being natural. They say that there are no drug interactions. Of course there are no drug interactions because there's no drug. There's no side effects. They are targeting people who care about their kids and giving them a product that does nothing. I think that's fundamentally irresponsible and antithetical to humanism. The healthcare system is so flawed that the opportunity for hucksters, flim-flam artists, all of these alt-med crooks to take advantage, and they're doing it. So we're trying to stop them on this. Certainly trying to stop the corporations from doing it.
Do you have any idea what percentage of the products that are sold are homeopathic? What is the impact financially?
We don't have that information yet. Now, because we won this appeal decision, we go into discovery. So we can start deposing CVS people and looking at their internal documents. Again, next time you're in your pharmacist, look at this. Not only are homeopathic products there intermingled, they tend to be at eye level. And there's the old marketing phrase of eye level is buy level. I don't know if Walmart and CVS take money for product placement. I can now find that out. If they are taking money from homeopathic manufacturers, then my case just becomes much stronger. Yeah.
Can you say something about why are you suing the FDA?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, the FDA part of it. This is a Freedom of Information Act case. As I mentioned when I was talking about regulation, the big bumper book of homeopathy, the spell book, the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia, this is the book that lists all of these homeopathic potions, and then the government says if it's in there, it counts as a drug. So we want to see the book. Here's the problem. The book is controlled by the homeopathic industry, and it would cost us $20,000 a year to get access to the book. So we thought, no problem. We'll go to the government and say, you must have a copy of this. They don't have a copy. They rent access to it. So we're now in this huge battle over, because my argument is that if you download a single page onto your computer, you have that in your possession. So you can give us pages. But they're refusing to release this book to us, and also the details of their discussions with the homeopathic industry. So, yeah, we're pushing back on that. If something is in federal law saying that it has, anything in this book is legally a drug, then the public should be able to see that. The public should not have to pay money to see something that's in their law.
Well, I think there's really good points, on this as far as, homeopathic medications that you've made. Pharmacists, as you know, will be consulted on prescription drugs. They're required by law. That's kind of where pharmacy came from, to provide that consultation to people that have prescriptions. But I personally don't know a pharmacist that would recommend a homeopathic drug. The difficulty in the stores, I think, is that if they ask the pharmacist a question about this particular thing, the pharmacist, generally from what I've heard, will just simply say, well, it contains no active ingredients at all. You're buying sugar water. effectively. That's what a pharmacist will tell them. Now, obviously, there's possibly some conflicts as an employee of the corporation, okay, to say things like that. But I believe by and large, pharmacists don't like, homeopathic medications because it brings so much treatment confusion, to the whole area.
If I gave people the impression that there are a bunch of pharmacists out there recommending this, that was wrong of me, and I didn't mean to on it. I think, again, you're definitely right on that. The problem I see a lot of it is the line at the pharmacist is like 20 minutes long when I go there. So if I have a prescription, I'll stand in line for it. I'm much less likely to ask for the advice because the store is already giving me that advice. If they have a sign that says pain relief and it's in the pharmacy, to me, that is the pharmacist giving me the advice. I'm not blaming the pharmacist as an individual. Clearly, they didn't make that choice, but it is using the credibility of the pharmacist unwillingly on the pharmacist's part to give credibility to a bogus product.
Yeah, definitely. And I like your approach of going after the labeling. Like if it's a painkiller, it's on the painkiller aisle and it doesn't contain any active ingredient, then, it's fraud, okay, as far as...
Right, and the weird thing is, and to be overly specific on this, we can't go after the labeling because that's under the FDA rules. And that's
right.
About the only thing they do follow. We're looking at the tags in the store.
Right, and that's, I think it's a brilliant approach to it because that is where the credibility gap is having in a section that says pain relief and it's a sugar tablet.
Go to CVS's website, look up on CVS's website. They say that they are your partner in healthcare decisions. They set themselves up as being involved in the process. They can't then turn around and say, oh no, this is just consumer choice. They can't have it both ways.
Yeah, thank you for your answer on that. And I'm just saying that I think that pharmacists would consider it by and large unethical to recommend a homeopathic product, okay? And that
everyone I've spoken to.
Right, and actually their ethics, themselves, I would say that the pharmacy ethics people could probably be talking to CVS and say, look, our pharmacists don't like this misrepresentation, and things like that, and put pressure on the industry from, the different pharmacy organizations. I would think that they would do this because, it's just ridiculous what's going on in these stores.
I wish they would as well. We've asked them. We're going to carry on pressing on them. I should also at this point say that our legal department has 2 people in it. When I started these, it had 1 person in it, which was me. We have a pile of things we need to do that is as tall as I am. I fundamentally believe we can get something done through the professional body. We just need to shake some sense into them.
Yeah, I definitely think so too, because they're going to be having expert witnesses that can testify in Congress, by that as hearings are formed and stuff like this. And if they say it's confusing, the patient as far as what a reasonable remedy is and things like that, they'll put it under, some kind of Federal Trade Commission thing versus the FDA, as far as I can tell anyway, because it's a misrepresentation.
Yeah.
It's not an FDA issue. I think it's a Federal Trade Commission issue. Just an opinion anyway.
Hi, I just wondered, in proving harm to a product, would the fact that some people use homeopathic products in lieu of medical treatment, let's say they have cancer at the early stages and they use the homeopathic product to try and get rid of it, and then it's only when it's too late they go to the doctor. Could you use cases like that to prove harm for a product?
Yeah, absolutely. We divide the harm into 3 sections. There's the cost of the product that, you are paying $39.99 for 50 cents worth of sugar. There is the actual direct harm, such as when I talked about the teething tablets. If the products are tainted, there's direct harm. And then there's the opportunity cost. We don't tend to deal with the direct harm one much because if you use a product on your kid and your kid, like there's been some cases recently of eardrops, childhood infections, ear infections, and children going deaf after it. If that happens to your kid, you're going to go to a plaintiff's lawyer and you are going to hold them up by their ankles and shake the money out of their pockets. And good luck to you. So we are that opportunity cost thing. We are focusing on, and yeah, there are the really tragic cases. If you go to the website, What's the Harm? It has this for all types of alt med, and it's sickening when you see these people who die because they used homeopathic treatments. It's particularly mad when they give them to their kids on it because the kid can't make the choice. But there's also a lower harm. I mean, if you have the flu sucks. Even if it's, you're not being hospitalized, it's miserable. And so on the one hand, you can take a silicockinum and it does nothing, or you can take NyQuil. NyQuil doesn't cure you, but at least you get a decent night's sleep out of it. So there's even the harm just on that you are cheated out of having a better treatment.
Yeah, but I'm thinking maybe these people who have been harmed by these products can be like a class action. Either you could have them be like a class action set of witnesses at the very least, or maybe have a class action lawsuit with these people together, because there's power and safety in numbers.
Definitely possible. There's a very weird thing which just amazes me that goes on in this, though. When you're talking about people who have had a relative die because they took homeopathic treatments, not regular treatment, they still believe in homeopathy. They're the true believers. And it blows my mind that you get people who do this, but you do. But I agree that is definitely in the arsenal of things that we hope to do at some stage in the future.
If I ever get a homeopathy business, I better stay in Canada. Just kidding.
Thanks, Linda. Zim.
Thanks for the great presentation. The example you gave, though, homeopathic medicine, since the concept has been around since the 1700s, the scientific community has had plenty of time, and government regulators have had plenty of time to debunk it as BS. So we can sit here and be in consensus that it is BS, and I certainly am. But truth is the victim of the modern world, right? Modern world is a lot more complex. And so if I can, I can sell you snake oil today, which will look very different. It will not have the snake's picture on it. It will have a computer web screen with the phrase Chat GPT. And I will tell you that this program can now engage you in intelligent conversation. Did I sell you a true product or did I BS you? And how would you know? In other words, the example you gave us, in a way, I mean, it's of course a real example, but it's contrived in the sense that it's a very simple example, a very obvious example.
Definitely. One of the reasons we picked homeopathy is that there's no argument.
Oh, okay.
It's categorically nonsense. Yeah, I mean, we could sit down over multiple beers and over, is there dissent AI involved? And I'm going to tell you, I don't know. I do not know what the answer is going to be there.
Thanks. Roger.
I'd like to follow up on a comment you made earlier about writing letters to your local pharmacist. I went to my local CVS, it's not the one you're going to visit, but one here in town, and I complained to the manager about the homeopathic products on the shelf, and she said she had very little, if any, control over what's in the store and what's displayed. So I think a letter writing campaign has to find out who the decision maker is, who's, I don't know, maybe it's a regional manager or somebody, but it's not the local poor store manager. You can hassle them, but all it do is earn you enmity. You got to find out who's making the decision.
Absolutely. And those are the people we have had some conversations with, because Victor is completely right. This is way above his pay grade on the decisions. Putting planograms together, I think, is what they're called. There is a vice president of planograms at CVS. It is at a much higher pay grade. So it's a matter of picking, the right people on this, but also sometimes you target people whose fault it isn't, because you then get them to complain up the chain. You get them to be saying with their boss, their regional manager, that it's like, hey, I had these people coming in saying this is nonsense. Can you get them off my back?
That maybe is something the Humanist Society could do, is get every one of us to pick a pharmacist and see how far we can push it up the chain.
Yeah.
One more question, it looks like. Alex and Sana?
Could you tell me something more about your organization? I don't know what the URL is. Also, I was wondering if I could get you to speak to our group. I'm with the humanist community in Silicon Valley. So
Absolutely happy to do that. Yes. But so the organization is the Center for Inquiry, and it's centerforinquiry.org.
Yeah, it strikes me that a lot of this problem is just that money talks. Money is so influential. And the idea that regulatory agencies are generally powerless, understaffed, and corruptible, like everyone else is. That's just a comment. It's not really a question.
It's a comment that I face every single day at work. It's like, money talks. So give me money.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for a wonderful talk.
Yeah, one more question as far as, there are these homeopathic school accreditation people, okay, that are out there accrediting homeopathic schools. And I'm going like, couldn't they be prosecuted under RICO, okay? As far as that's concerned.
Hypothetically, and I'm speaking totally off the top of my head here, the government could go after them with RICO. And I would laugh and laugh and laugh if it was. I mean, they're interstate, they use, they would hit, from what I know of RICO, which most of my knowledge of RICO is from watching The Sopranos, so I know quite how accurate it is. But I'd love to see that, because the schools drive me utterly crazy.
Yeah, because they also have this Association of Homeopathic Pharmacists, and actually the American Pharmacy Association would consider it unethical to be a member of it. So it doesn't have any really legitimate members. It probably has
been to their conference.
It probably has less than a dozen members on it, I guess, but it's out there as representing itself as a major society.
No, definitely.
All right. Thanks, Michael. And I guess we have one more from Bill Meller.
So I really appreciate the talk, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you at the dinner at Rusty's shortly. And as an enticement to get some people to come to dinner who may not think that it would be interesting in addition, I know that you've invited me to speak for a few minutes, so I've decided as an evidence-based physician to talk on the benefits of homeopathy and what it has added to medical science. And I'm fully confident that you're going to all be in agreement, but it's going to be in the tradition of good, skeptical, and scientific conversation. So I look forward to meeting you there.
Thanks. All right, Drew, do you have some closing remarks?
I wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow is Darwin's birthday. Not only was Charles Darwin born on February 12th, 1809, but Abraham Lincoln was born on the day in the same year. Happy birthday to Darwin. Thanks again to our speaker. Fantastic, and looking forward to seeing what we can do to help you with that. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.